There is one more function which you can use, that is rank X.
That
One
can
is
also be used to print maximum and minimum value, right?
rank X.
Yeah, you rank the products and then pick up which rank product you want to display.
Yes. Based on their rank, you can pick them, but it will not give you the amount because it just give you index column, kind of index column. I'll show you one example for this because this is a very common scenario most of the time. For example, like in your organization, you had some employees, like any event, and you want to calculate all the participants, the rank for all the participants, right? So in such scenarios, basically, you can get a you can use this rank X function, and it gives you a lot of flexibility. So one question I have, we know that we can see the relationship, we can use the relationship, if you see, okay, and this solid line means that this is an active relationship, right? We have a procedure of inactive relationships as well, right? So if I just double click on this relationship, then I can make this relationship inactive. The relationship will exist, but it is now inactive. So I was waiting one question like, then what's the use of this relationship? If it is inactive, then it means it's useless for us. So did anybody faced any such scenario where you are having the inactive relationships, right? But you want to use them and you can't make it active because there is another relationship in between two tables. You can have only one active relationship. But let's say if you have one more relationship in the same table, but that is inactive and you want to use that.
Yeah, but generally we used to delete all the default relationships that used to come with the data set, and by ourselves we don't generally create this inactive relationship.
But sometimes
So
we need
that's
to
why,
create.
yeah,
Sometimes
that's why we didn't get that scenario where we have to use an inactive relationship.
okay, I'm giving you a scenario. So here, if you see, I have two tables, right? One is my orders table and second is date table, right? Date. And the relationship you have between these two tables based on date and date, right? But what you want basically, if relationship is like this, right? And so it means you can use the other columns. Let's say you have some other columns here, right? Then you can those columns based on this relationship only. Okay, but let's say if you want to establish one more relationship in the same table, for example, if you want to calculate some values based on the order date, but some other values you want to calculate based on the ship date, then you want to create one more relationship here with ship date to date. Okay, but this will be inactive, right? This relationship will be a dotted relationship, and this will be a like solid line, right? So and where it can be used, for example, there is one order ID, right? So ship date and order date can be different, right? Now what you want to count order IDs, count of order ID based on order date, right? Based on which date? Order date. So it means at that time this relationship will work, order date relationship will work. But let's say if somebody asks you that I want to see the same data but not order date wise, I want to see with the ship date wise. Okay, and you can't change the, you want to display these two count of order IDs parallelly, right? One is with order date and second is with ship date. So here you create one more relationship with it, but that will be inactive, right? So how can you use this?
So I think we can use this with the help of DAX.
Yes, definitely. So for that, we have a function here, DAX function. So using this function, we can use inactive relationship. So that's the concept of having the inactive relationships. It means if in scenarios you are having the inactive relationships and as per your requirement, you want to use them, you want to calculate some values based on those relationships which are inactive, then you can use the DAX use relationship function and you can use the inactive relationship same as active, but practically only one relationship will be active. All right, so these two functions, because these are also sometimes very useful. So let's go quickly with each one of these. Okay, not each, just complete DAX we are going to review once again, right? Okay, so here I'm having this HR data, right? I was trying to make some demonstrations on it, but the thing is like in this data I'm not getting more calculations, right? Because maybe this is just like what I'm thinking, but I'm not Sure, like on HR data, you can also do a lot of calculations because here are like fact values. There are very less fact values in this data set, right? So generally, more fact values we have in some like sales, marketing, finance, or maybe some such kind of data sets, right? All right, so let me just delete this min. All right, I got one more function, countif and sumif. Okay, so countif and sumif is sumx and countex, right? In Excel, you can say them countif and sumif. And lookup function, all right, sure, Sahil. This one I'll consider. Okay, let me add it into the list. Lookup function is also like the same used to get the data from other tables, right? And the good thing with the lookup function is it doesn't require any relationship, right? Okay, so countif and sumif function is here. You can see sumx and countex, right? So these function gives you flexibility to write some like conditional also before doing sum or count. All right, so just getting the same table. All right, so we have these tables here. We got the relationships, right? Relationships have been automatically created. Why? Because auto detect relationship feature was enabled, right? If you want, you can make that disable also. Okay, so we are using these relationships. Okay, so let's start with the very basic one, which is so there is one thing you were thinking about it. Let's say if you want to display something, for example, by order date wise, if you want to display something, then what you do, you add the order date, then you add, for example, you want to display the total quantity, let's say. So what you will search the quantity. This is from the beginning. We are going to have a look at all the DAX functions, right? So if you see here, year wise data has been automatically aggregated, right? So there is a question like if it is automatically doing the aggregation, it's already automatically doing the sum, then what's the need of writing a sum DAX expression, right? So what happens when you visuals are also having the capability to do the aggregation, right? So how you see, you just click on this and here you can see the default aggregation is sum, right? So there are some other functions also, some other aggregation methods also which you can use, but the default is sum. Now the point, you want to display the same data but you want to write a DAX, you want to get this information. So for example, I'm going to create a measure here. Okay, so before that, let's have a quick understanding on the measures and columns. So as I have already explained you that using DAX, we can create measures, calculated columns, calculated tables, and expressions in row level security, right? So what is calculated column? See, calculated column behave same as your default, right? So these columns are coming from your data source directly, right? If you want, you can create another columns also here. You can add some other columns also. Okay, so those columns will be the calculated columns, means you are creating those columns based on some calculations, based on some conditions by just writing a DAX in Excel, right? So for example, we have these two columns and I want to create another column. So I write some expression here, some formula, right? So this, what will be this? This is my calculated column. So in the same way, in Power BI, you can understand, let's say I'm having if two columns here, right? If you see here, I have these two columns, let's say contact name and contact title. If I want to aggregate, if I want to concatenate, one column will be added here. Okay, and that column I can see here in the table. It means when I create a column, that will be part of your table. And then that column, that calculated column, you can use in the same way as you use these default columns. There is not any difference after creating that kind of like you can't use that column in relationship, you can't use that column in your measures, right? Except query editor, right? Because these default columns which are coming from your source, these columns you can see and you can use in query editor, but the calculate column will not be displayed into the query editor. You can't use. So this is calculate column. When you create a column, use size of your table. So be sure like when you are creating the columns, when you are adding the new columns, right? So those are like unnecessary columns you are not creating. So make sure this one. Now the second thing is measure. Measure is basically nothing but it's just a calculation. Whenever you want to do any aggregation, right, then you have to use measure, because the key thing for the measure is measures require at least one aggregated function. Without an aggregation function, you can't create the measure. What are the aggregation functions? For example, like min, max, sum, count, and average, right? So such kind of are the aggregation functions. So if you want to calculate any value where you feel that aggregation is required, then you can go with the measures. You can create the measures. Why measures? Because generally we have to create a lot of calculations, right, in our report or visualization purpose. Then it's not possible for us that we create the columns. You can create, but it's not a good approach, because some people create the columns also. If they don't know the behavior of the measures, they can create the columns, but it's because that will be having the redundant data in your tables. And when you have the redundant data and unnecessary columns, then it means your table will be having the unnecessary data and it will be taking a lot of time to load onto the Power BI service during your data refresh time. So the good thing with measures are these are just a calculations, and this will be calculated on the fly. On the fly means like dynamically. It will not be having storage any physical existence in your data model. These calculations will be and directly it will be visible onto the visuals, right? Again, same thing, you can't use the measures in query editor. Why? Because whatever you create using the DAX, you can't see or you can't use that in query editor, right? So this is, you can say, like kind of a limitation with the DAX right now, which you can't use query editor. So this is measure and calculate columns. Right now, let's see some examples like how to decide where to create measure and where to create column, because this is a very common confusion people having, that where we have to create the column, where we have to create the measures. Got it? All right. So now the same visual I want to create, right? Same data I want to display, but this time I want to create a DAX expression. Okay. So what I have to do for it? Let's create a column for it. Okay, so first what I want to do, I want to do a sum of total quantity. So if I try to create a column, right, so then let's see what happens. Okay, so in this table I'm going to create a new column. This is, for example, sum of quantity, right? So what you will do here, you will write a sum expression, and in this sum expression what use the quantity column. When I press enter, you will see your created here. And here, if you notice what is happening, like the sum has been calculated correctly, but it means this selected value 51317 is the sum of this column, of the quantity column. But the problem is here, it is appearing, it's reflecting, it's coming in each row, right? Which is wrong. Ideally, you can present the data using this also, right? Because you can use the min or max. So let me do that. If I take the same function, I use order date, and sum of quantity. When I pull it, if you notice that it is showing me the for, let me just format painter it. Yeah, for 1996, you see the total sum of quantity is 27, very big amount, while you see here it's 9581 only. So what you can do, you have to change it here. Just go here, and right now it is sum, so you can minimum. In minimum it's always same, max is also same, variance, okay, median you cannot use, average also you can't use in this. I'm just trying to show at least one example so that because here we are segregating this value by order date, right? But let's say if I want to show the total sales only in the card visual, then what you can do, then you can use the min or max, right? Let's say in this visual only you want to just display the total sales, right? So right now it is showing 111 million, but ideally it is one column only you want, right? The 151,317, right? Then you can use, just get the none, yes, right? So here you got from, it means we created a column which was, but from that column also, if you want to display the single value on a card visual, then you can display that, right? But you can't do it on other measure visuals, let's say on bar chart, on line chart, or any other. Where, why? Because that has to be segregated by different values which you have on your axis. So that's why in some scenarios you can somehow put your requirement, like by creating a column instead of measure, you got your results, but it doesn't mean like that is a correct approach. That's a wrong approach, right? It was like, luckily, if you are just showing the value into the card and it is coming correct, then it's just by chance, because it's just, card can take it as a min or max, it will give you the same result. But when you will segregate it, when you want to display it any like any other dimension wise, then it will not give you the correct results, right? So that's why you need a measure, because measures are having the flexibility, like they can like segregate any dimension column, right? So what is this? Order date is my one dimension. Let's say category, customer name, product name, all these are what? Dimensions, different dimensions. So measures value will be automatically populated based on the selected dimension on the visual. Got it? So why I created this column, just to explain you that why such kind of calculation you can't create a column. Okay, so we need to understand it from very scratch. So instead of this, what we have to do, we have to create a measure, because we have to create the column. Then what will happen? So you will kind of challenges that on card, on single value, you can display the data, but when you want to display your data based on different dimensions, then you won't be able to do that, right? Because column does not give you that flexibility which measures gives you, right? So now let's delete this column and create a measure. So I think now it should clear at least like why, where we create the column and where we create the measure. So now I'm creating a measure, sum of quantity. Now what I'll do, the same expression I'll use here, right? Same expression you will use here, quantity, close bracket and press enter. Now as I have deleted that column, right? So here I'm getting the error. So what I'll do, I'll just replace this column by the measure value. So here I just delete it and add the sum of quantity measure. Here you got the data. And this one also I remove and replace. So now what is happening here, this measure value, if you notice, this measure value, I'm not in the, yes, one more important thing. Measure values, you don't need to do aggregation. Why? Because measures are already having an aggregated value, right? If you notice, when I add, let me just create a duplicate one for this. If I add the quantity column here, then what happens? Quantity column will having a default aggregation, and there are some other aggregations also which you can choose, right? Means columns, when you visualize anything, any fact value, what is fact value? Fact value are nothing but values which you want to measure. For example, like your salary, your number of leaves, your employees count, your sales amount, your profit, your quantity, right? All these are your fact values. So every visual requires a aggregated data. Non-aggregated data you cannot display here on these visuals, right? Except like table and metrics. So then you have to provide a aggregated measure, or if you are adding a column, then you have to choose one aggregation from here. So that's why in measure, when you display your data in measure, some or those aggregation functions here. Why? Because measure itself a aggregated calculation. How I can say aggregated calculation? If you see the formula of this, you see it is sum, and what is it? It's aggregated value, right? So it is getting the aggregated sum of quantity. So measure is already a aggregated value. So that's why those aggregation functions does not come here. We need to build this we need to understand it very strongly, like what is measure, what is column, where to create what, right? So this is the very basic, very first thing which you need to be you should be having a clear understanding on it, right? So now I have this measure here and I'm displaying the dimension. What is the dimension value here? Order date. Now let's remove the order date dimension, and instead of order date I want to display it with other value. If I don't have the any dimension value, then it will show me the total of all the total of my measure value, which is 5137. You can see here 5137 on the tooltip. Right now, let's say if I want to display it, I want to segregate it by segment, or like let's say by category. I add category in excess, so it means I am adding another dimension. Once I add, it has been automatically segregated, right? So it is just a right. And why it is just, it's because it's on the fly. Based on your dimension, this measure will be recalculated on the fly and it will display the results in your visuals. So that's the reason why we use the measures for any kind of calculations, mathematical calculations, or we can say aggregated calculations. But there are some exceptions also, some other scenarios also where you provide some other measures, but those are not for any like displaying for any fact values for any calculation. Those are like something different. For example, a two value slicer, and you want to show those two selected values into a card visual, then you can create that also. But ideally, it's not a mathematical calculation, right? Okay, it's what? It is concatenation. So such kind of thing also you can do into the measure. Means whatever you want to change dynamically or whatever you want to change on the fly, that you have to achieve using the measure. Now let's move to the next thing. So here we saw that what is calculated column. See, it is calculated. If you say calculated column or column, it is same thing, right? But in just of Power BI, it's just a terminology. That's it, nothing else. Everywhere, wherever you will read some blogs or some articles, it will be written as a calculated column. Okay, that basically just denotes that this column is created by the DAX. That's why it's a calculated column. If you say only column, then there will be some confusion whether it's a default table column or it's a DAX created column, right? So that's why we say like it's a calculated column, or in the same way like calculated table. Calculated table means this table was created using the DAX. Okay, just to identify this. That's it. Now let's move to the next thing. So here we say like we are clear with the column and the measures, right? Now let's say some other calculations. And yes, one more thing, whenever you create your measures into a table, right? Just to separate them, just as a best practice. So I hope that you know how we create the measure table, because if you see here, these tables are having the table icons, right? If you see all the icons for these, all the queries for all these tables, it is like a table. So what you want, the measure icon is something like a calculator. So you have to create a separate table here, and the icon of that table should be measure, right? Means a calculator, and all your measures you have to put in those measure tables based on their requirement, based on their work or their purpose. So it's not mandatory, it's just a best practice, right? So that you can have a good management of all your measure values.